A very warm welcome to all of you. Good morning. Thank you for joining our virtual roundtable on women in maritime and port security. I am Allison August Truppel, the Executive Secretary of the Inter-American Committee Against Terrorism of the Organization of American States, and I am delighted that all of you have joined us here this morning. I am going to be wearing two hats this morning, one as one of your opening speakers, as the host of this event, and also I will have the pleasure of moderating today's session. So you'll be seeing quite a bit of me. But let me start first by expressing my most sincere thanks to the government of the United Kingdom for their very generous support of this initiative, and most importantly, for their interest in supporting this topic. Specifically, I would like to thank Ms. Harriet Cross, British High Commissioner to Trinidad and Tobago, for joining us for this opening session, and a warm welcome as well to my colleague Alejandra Mora Mora, who is the Executive Secretary of the Inter-American Commission on Women. And we will be hearing throughout the course of the day from a very distinguished panel of speakers. Thanks to all of you for joining us here today. Our goal in organizing this event is to focus on the role of women in maritime and port security. Throughout today, tomorrow, and Friday, this is a 3-day event, we will be looking to address the factors which preclude or discourage women from participating and leading within the maritime sector. Available statistics, which are limited, suggest that less than 30% of onshore maritime-related positions worldwide are held by women. And the statistics for Latin America and the Caribbean may be even lower, some projecting that only 20% of these positions onshore are held by women in this region. But that's not all. The percentage of women in seafaring positions is shockingly low as 2%, according to some estimates. Honestly, it's hard to believe that today, the year 2021, we can continue to have such abysmally low participation rates in an economic sector that is so vitally important, not just to our region, but to the world. The maritime industry today faces enormous challenges, including increased digitalization and the need to maintain, improve, and revitalize port facilities in our region. Global shipping continues to be a driver of enormous economic growth, and the incorporation of women at all levels of this industry could help promote innovation in this area. We have a number of panels scheduled in the coming days that will identify and explore the factors that contribute to these low figures and help perpetuate gender inequalities in this sector, including the lack of access to education and leadership opportunities, the lack of employment policies that permit a reasonable work-life balance, and both conscious and unconscious bias in decision-making regarding hiring, training, and promotion of individuals within the maritime sector. Inequality in the maritime and port security sectors has received far less attention in recent years than in other economic areas, but that's changing. I am encouraged by the fact that during our sessions this week, we will have participants joining from a number of OAS member states, including Belize, Dominican Republic, Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Trinidad and Tobago. We also have the opportunity to hear perspectives from representatives of some of the neighboring Commonwealth Islands of Anguilla, British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, and Montserrat. All of them will share their experiences and insights on how we can better value the contributions of all of our citizens, men and women, in the maritime and port security domain going forward. We will also seek to highlight success stories and try to analyze how those women have succeeded. We will explore what are the programs, the mechanisms, and the people who made a difference in their lives and in their careers. And hopefully, in so doing, we will focus on areas of opportunities for others in the region who may wish to pursue similar paths. And finally, on Friday, we will bring together all the lessons learned and formulate some recommendations to guide our collective work going forward, because we very much need to work together to strengthen the role of women in the maritime and port security sector. And so for this reason, again, I am very, very thrilled to have all of you here with us today and hopefully for the remainder of the week. With that, with those brief opening remarks, I am very now honored to offer the floor to Ms. Harriet Cross, British High Commissioner to Trinidad and Tobago. Ms. Cross, High Commissioner, thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Secretary. Thank you for those opening remarks, and thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this today. It's really a pleasure to be here and to be talking to this group of people. So as you mentioned in your opening, this particular event and programme has been funded by the UK's Conflict Stability and Security Fund, known as the CSSF. And actually it's the first of its kind for CSSF and the Caribbean, because, and again, you touched on this, it sees all the Caribbean countries, including the Dominican Republic and the British Overseas Territories, coming together to discuss what is actually quite a neglected area. And I was really delighted to be part of this programme because I thought this subject area, women in maritime and port security, was so interesting and so important. The context to this is that this activity forms part of the CSSF strengthening cross-border security cooperation in the Caribbean. It's part of a bigger picture. And that supports a couple of objectives. One is driving greater political and security collaboration through Caribbean islands, and that's through joint operations, training, institutional development, collective strategic planning, and increased cooperation between countries and within institutional regional institutions. So it's got a lot of different benefits. Yes, it's about women. Yes, it's about improving security, but it's also about creating broader links and networks that will hopefully achieve broader results in terms of cooperation. It's also of significance for us on the UK side because in terms of the CSSF Caribbean programme, this programme goes above and beyond what we would count as the minimum standards regarding gender in programming. So we're really breaking new ground here in terms of what we're doing to promote and support women in this sector. So it's really meaningful for us. Again, as we heard in your opening remarks, Executive Secretary, that the importance of gender equality in the maritime and port security industry can't be understated. We all know this is a historically male-dominated industry, and these discussions, which are talking about diversity and inclusion and the leadership challenges that women face in the industry, are very much needed now. They've always been needed, but particularly now when it's often women who've been most badly affected by COVID-19. The statistics I've seen for many countries shows that more women have lost their jobs as a result of COVID-19 than men. So for economic development purposes, particularly important that we can find ways to get women back into employment, but interesting employment, employment that's got a real future. So for me, this is a really significant step forward. As you know, for the UK, diversity and inclusion are of paramount importance in foreign and domestic policy. We ourselves have had to undergo a real cultural reformation in terms of our maritime and security industry in the last few years. We've now got more women in senior management positions, as well as more women on the front line, kind of really doing the dirty work, if you like. For example, the deep rummage teams, which in the past, that was seen as too dirty for women. But I think women can show they can be there at the top levels doing strategy and policy, and actually they can be there getting their hands dirty and showing leadership on the front line as well, which I think is really important. So yes, the UK has made progress, but we also face some really critical challenges which we share with you in the Caribbean. So I'm talking about responding effectively to complex security environments, and the need to address actually vulnerabilities of capacity in this area. So I know we're going to talk about all that today. So let me finish by saying a huge thank you to the Organization of American States, to the Secretariat of the Inter-American Committee Against Terrorism, and to the Maritime and Port Security Program officers more broadly. You've done excellent work in pulling this program together. Thank you so much. It's one of these times when I really wish I could speak Spanish, and I don't, because I've listened to you speak in Spanish in the margins, and I wish I could, but alas, no. So thank you so much. Have a great session, and I look forward to hearing all about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We very much appreciate your time. Again, your time, the support of the UK government. I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. Am I coming through okay? My tech team, just making sure. Okay, I'm going to continue on, even though I can hear myself echoing in my own headset. But again, before I move on, just want to thank, again, the UK government for their support of this work and for the inspiring words. And with that, I will now offer the floor to my colleague, friend Alejandra Mora, Executive Secretary of the Inter-American Committee on Women. Please, Alejandra, the floor is yours.
Sí, muchas gracias, Alison. Siempre es un gusto, señora secretaria, poder compartir con usted. Estamos haciendo muchos trabajos juntos y agradezco este espacio tan interesante para hablar en un ámbito como el que estamos hablando, que es absolutamente masculino, no solamente en términos de participación, sino de ritos y símbolos. Saludo también a la señora Harriet, alta comisionada británica de Trinidad y Tobago. Y bueno, celebrar que estemos haciendo este evento, que SICTE tenga este espacio, con ocasión de este mes, que es el mes de las mujeres. Debería ser todos los días del año, pero vamos a aprovechar y estamos aprovechando que en marzo, el 8 de marzo, hablamos de lo que sucede con las mujeres. Y cada vez más nosotras, como la mitad de la población que somos, estamos alcanzando otros sectores e industrias que han tenido un ritmo mucho más lento de inserción de las mujeres, como ha sido el sector marítimo y portuario. Como decíamos, es altamente masculinizado y es muy importante entender que no solamente porque están los hombres en su mayoría presentes en estos espacios, sino porque han llenado los ritos y símbolos propios del ejercicio de esta masculinidad, y entonces para las mujeres entrar es cada vez más un reto, y un reto del cual por eso es tan importante conversar. Ya decía la señora Allison una serie de datos que me parecen importantísimos, pero también entender la importancia que tiene este sector, digamos, internacional, en el mundo, en lo que representa en términos de gestión, los millones que mueve, la apertura, digamos, que tiene para todo el sector comercial, y donde casi no hay mujeres, y por eso esta industria tiene que cada vez más feminizarse, abrir paso a las necesidades y a las mujeres. No solamente en los sectores tradicionales donde las mujeres han estado, que debe ser turismo, servicios, y en el sector portuario más en el tema administrativo, sino realmente pensar en las mujeres, sobre todo, decía ahora quienes me precedieron, en un lugar tan golpeado para las mujeres como el sector laboral. Es un buen momento para entonces pensar que esta crisis, que tiene un impacto desproporcional sobre las mujeres, puedan repensarse también reingresando desde otro rol. Para la Comisión Interamericana de Mujeres, en términos generales, hemos señalado que la COVID ha representado un impacto diferenciado sobre los temas de discriminación y violencia contra las mujeres, como todas lo hemos visto, pero también serios riesgos de retroceso. Cuando estamos hablando de que la nueva realidad o este nuevo evento, digamos, que es una reconstrucción de muchos temas, pero particularmente de la economía. Aquí se requiere el talento humano de las mujeres. Y sobre este tema hemos señalado una barrera estructural, dos barreras estructurales que vamos a tener y que quisiera colocar también para la reflexión que se va a tener el día de hoy. Uno es el tema del cuidado y cómo las mujeres hemos venido asumiendo el cuidado históricamente, pero cuando llegó la COVID y todo lo que sucedía en el mundo de lo público se hace en el mundo de lo privado y las mujeres entonces estamos ya no solo cuidando, sino atendiendo la parte educativa de los niños, atendiendo a los adultos mayores que no necesariamente tienen enfermedades, sino que ahora tienen unas nuevas dependencias porque no pueden trasladarse solos ni a satisfacer sus necesidades mínimas y así por el estilo se han aumentado más o menos 10 nuevos patrones de cuidados y esto genera una tensión y una presión impresionante sobre la disponibilidad del uso del tiempo de las mujeres y la posibilidad de inserción en el mundo laboral remunerado, por lo cual hemos colocado como un tema estructural para la reactivación económica resolver el cuidado y pasar del cuidado de un tema individual y familiar a un tema colectivo y del Estado y público, y en el marco de alianzas estratégicas público-privadas. Y el otro gran tema que hemos señalado es la necesidad de que las mujeres empecemos a transformar los entornos en los que estemos y resignificarlos desde nuestras habilidades diferenciadas. Mucho se ha dicho sobre esto en la pandemia. Se ha dicho que generamos entornos con una gran confiabilidad, que poseemos una habilidades de empatía derivadas justamente de esta acción de cuidar, que ha sido como un tema casi del ADN de las mujeres, y todo esto genera, digamos, condiciones especiales y que tienen una nueva valoración para la inserción laboral de las mujeres. Este espacio, el sector marítimo portuario, debe de hacer un profundo esfuerzo entonces para hacer acciones afirmativas que le permitan incrementar el reclutamiento de las mujeres, pero no solo reclutarlo, llamarlas, sino retenerlas. Y dos elementos adicionales en las dificultades y las barreras de las mujeres para quedarse en los espacios, el tema de lo patriarcal y la cultura, sobre el cual se expresa a través de una serie de estereotipos y prejuicios sobre lo que las mujeres somos y de los liderazgos de las mujeres. Hay que hacer una ruptura enorme para mirar estas potencialidades y dejar estar hablando solo de las mujeres como víctimas, sino desde nuestro rol potenciador y desde nuestras profundas y diferenciadas habilidades. El otro tema es cuido y por supuesto el tema de las brechas salariales entre los hombres y las mujeres, que se sitúa en más de un 20% y en estos espacios masculinizados muchas veces aumenta. Decía que hay acciones afirmativas que hacer para poder hacer reclutamiento. También hay que hacer capacitación en las áreas no tradicionales para las mujeres. Hay que generar una política de género en el sector marítimo portuario y, por supuesto, hay que oír mucho a las mujeres, como va a ser este espacio, para poder cada vez más, de mejor manera, atender estas necesidades. Solo desde las voces de las mujeres, decimos las feministas, nada sin nosotras, sobre una discusión sobre nuestros temas. De manera que esto es un ejercicio de esta naturaleza. Gracias, mi querida secretaria Alison, por compartirlo con la Comisión Interamericana de Mujeres, por hacer este esfuerzo, por visualizar las mujeres en los sectores no tradicionales y estar haciendo un esfuerzo como OEA colectivo para transformar este entorno y buscar un mundo mucho más igualitario. Muchas gracias, querida compañera, y celebro que hoy tengamos unas conclusiones y que las empujemos juntas hacia esas transformaciones. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Alejandra, Secretary, for your words. I know that as part of the outcome documents that we formulate at the end of the week, we will have a lot of activities that we will be able to implement together. We absolutely hope to be able to count on your support going forward, because as we've heard from you, as we heard from the High Commissioner, I think there's no shortage of challenges going forward. And one of the things that we know, and I don't want to jump ahead. I know we have a lot of panelists who are going to speak to the challenges, but as a woman who has worked in the security sector now for over 15 years, I think we have a good sense of the challenges ahead. It's not only making sure that the opportunities exist for women in traditionally male-dominated areas such as the maritime sector, the port sector, but also encouraging women to join these sectors, right? Encouraging, exciting women to join, even rummaging techniques, right? That it's a change that we need to work together to push ahead. And so with that, I will let you go. Thank you for joining us in these opening remarks. And we will be back in touch to see how we continue to work together on these areas. Thank you so much, Secretary. We have concluded our opening remarks, and we are now ready to move into our first panel session of the day, which will focus on challenges and, more importantly, successes that 3 of our panel speakers have had in the maritime industry. In our opening remarks, we've already heard about some of the challenges, but I think now we'll have an opportunity to hear a little bit more in depth about some of the specific difficulties that that are faced in the maritime and port sector. So we have an hour for this session. Each of our 3 panelists will have about 20 minutes to give us a general presentation, and then we'll wrap up this first session with questions and answers at the end. And if any of our participants here have questions that they would like to ask, I encourage you to please put those into our messaging session, and we will compile those at the end. But let's get started. Let me first introduce Ms. Carla Jeffrey. Ms. Jeffrey is the UK Overseas Territories Border Security Program Manager for the Conflict Stability and Security Fund, CSSF, which the High Commissioner prefaced at the beginning. She works on border, maritime security capability, and capacity building. Ms. Jeffrey has a master's in security, conflict, and international development. Prior to joining the Foreign, Commonwealth, and Development Office of the UK, she worked in the UK's Border Protection Squadron as a Border Force Maritime Officer, serving on board the fleet of cutters, which are offshore patrol vessels, and coastal patrol vessels for several years, both in UK territorial waters and on humanitarian missions in the Mediterranean. She also has received several accolades for her work while serving as a deck officer and law enforcement officer. With that, thank you very much again for joining us. Carla, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm joining on my mobile, so you'll have to excuse the strange size issues that I'm having on my camera.
Not a problem. We can see and hear you just fine.
Brilliant. I do have a presentation. I did send it through. I'm just wondering if someone might be so kind as to load it if possible.
Yes, Mauricio will put that on now.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Wow. Well, I'd like to start by saying how unbelievably honoured I am to be a part of this event with so many accomplished and successful women. I really do feel a little bit overwhelmed by it all, if I'm being perfectly honest. I thought I'd start by giving you a little bit of background about me. So I grew up by the sea on the south coast of England, and as a result of that, the sea's always been a huge part of my life. I travelled extensively after my bachelor's degree, and I spent a great deal of time in Southeast Asia and New Zealand, never very far from the water. In my mid-20s, I moved to Japan, and I suffered extreme withdrawal symptoms from not being in the sea. I did have a little try of swimming in Tokyo Bay, and it took several days to wash the smell off. After Japan, I moved to the Middle East in the Emirates, and I spent 3 years working as a scuba diving instructor, followed by a year in Fiji doing the same. Upon my return to the UK, I decided to pursue an area of interest that I'd developed during my travels, and I worked towards my master's in security, conflicts, and international development. And I knew at that point that that was the field that I wanted to work in. And as chance would have it, I suppose, shortly after graduation, I applied for a role with Border Force UK in the Fleet Protection Squadron and the Maritime Division. Can I have the next slide, please? We move to the next slide, please.
Sorry, we're having some typical. There we go. Mauricio?
Just give me a second.
Okay. Apologies.
No problem. Okay, so I thought I'd give you a little overview of, oh, there we go. So Border Force Maritime in the UK has a fleet of cutters and coastal patrol vessels which operate 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to patrol UK maritime borders and to respond to maritime border security threats. Crews generally work a 15-day on, 13-day off rotation, ensuring constant coverage of the borders. So I've just popped a slide in there so you can see the types of vessels that we're working on. Next slide, please. So in the fleet at the moment, there's approximately 130, just back one. Approximately 130 members in the fleet. And when I actually joined Border Force Maritime, I was one of only 6 women in the entire fleet. In land-based roles, the split between male and female is actually quite even. But on the maritime side, women are still making up less than 10% of the law enforcement officers serving on board. This number has been increasing over recent years, with the first female coastal patrol vessel commanders taking post 2 years ago, but it is still incredibly low, and there's still only around 10 or 11 women in the fleet at the moment. Next slide, please. So as I sort of move on through this presentation, I think it's really important to bear in mind that these are my own reflections of my own experiences working in the maritime industry. And as such, they might not be accurate for some of the other women that I worked with, but they are my own experiences and the challenges that I personally faced. So in my time on board in the UK, I almost managed to circumnavigate the UK, but not quite all the way. Next slide, please. And I spent 2 years deployed on vessels in the Mediterranean. So working with organisations like Frontex, we were based in either Sicily or Malta, deploying to waters off the coast of Libya to conduct humanitarian search and rescue missions. I was also deployed a couple of times to aid the effort in the Aegean, because we also had a vessel based out there. Next slide, please. Now, when I first began my duties on board the vessels, there were small things that I noticed at the beginning about being one of the few females in the role. So the job is one where many of the men on board have been in the role for quite some time. So we're talking 20 years and above. And some of them had a rather traditional, or dare I say, outdated view of women on boats. In many cases, it was more a sense of them feeling the need to be a gentleman. So not allowing me to throw a rope or do dirty work or lift something potentially heavy. These things did pass once I demonstrated my own capability in those particular areas. I'm not suggesting I had the strength to match a man, but I could effectively throw a rope. there was a feeling that I was viewed as fragile at times, which I could shrug off, but it did mean that in many ways I felt I had to prove myself worthy. So I tended to find myself working almost twice as hard as some of my colleagues for the same level of recognition, often volunteering for extra tasks because I felt I needed to make more of a mark. I also found myself at some points trying to be more macho, so that I could fit in with the male crew members. But again, I soon realised that this was pointless because I shouldn't have to sacrifice my own femininity when I was capable of doing the job as a woman. On one particular occasion, I was asked to cover a shortfall in crew on a vessel in the Aegean search and rescue operations. So I was working on with the crew that I didn't normally work with. And they were a new crew in terms of search and rescue, whereas I'd already had experience off the coast of Libya. We were designated roles for the mission in the event of a rescue, and I was told that my role would be on helming duties as the only female on board. I would be inside the wheelhouse, not being involved in the practical operation. I wasn't too pleased about this, and I suggested to the commander that as I was the only one on board that had practical experience, it made more sense for me to be on the deck working with the migrants that we were rescuing. After some considerable persuasion, he eventually allowed me to go outside and assist the crew who were attempting to process the migrants. There had been some tensions developing between some of the male migrants and the male members of crew that were out on deck. And as soon as I joined them, this tension dissipated. Now, I don't know if this is down to my being female or simply because of my experience in handling the situation, but it certainly demonstrated to my commander that I didn't need to be protected or sheltered from the kind of work that we were doing. There were other little things that I found challenging. So, for example, on board the cutters, the cabins had a bunk for 2 people. There were some operations where I was removed to a different vessel or that I didn't get to participate in because another female wasn't available to take up the second bed. So in order to have a full quota of crew, I'd be removed from that situation so that they could have 2 males in that space instead. There were no separate toilet or shower facilities on board. I always ended up getting up well in advance of my male counterparts in the mornings in order to use the ablutions without getting in anybody's way. This went on for several years until I joined my final cutter crew, and the commander on that vessel finally realised that what was going on wasn't really fair. So he actually scheduled different start times where possible so that I didn't always have to be the first person up and running. Another thing that I found where I was pushed into a gender stereotyped role was that the crews on board are relatively small. So each member of the crew was expected to take on a responsibility as chef for the day. And there was also a role of caterer for each patrol. And more, every time I joined the boat, the caterer role had automatically been given to me. And whenever there was an extra day of chefing going, because say an engineer had been scheduled for that day, and there was something that they had to address on a maintenance side of things, that role would then automatically fall to me to deal with, even though there were other people available to take on that role. One of the more difficult things that I found is that life on boats can be like living in a really small village. You tend to find that everyone knows everything about everyone, and there is a real grapevine effect. So it was quite disheartening for me at some points to hear rumours about myself or other women on the fleet which weren't true. I think where we were in such a minority, it was easy to say, oh, you know Carla on that boat, or oh, you know Anne on that boat. And the rumours were usually about assumptions about our sexual orientation or some imaginary sexual exploit with another member of crew or something along those lines. And although those rumours were unfounded, there were times when I found them quite upsetting, because that kind of thing could affect my career, it could affect my future prospects, and it certainly wasn't something that I was doing. I had a little word with myself at one point after being the victim of such a rumour, and thought, okay, I need to develop a thick skin. And I came to the conclusion that the people that I worked with, the people that were my crew members, knew me well enough to know that I wasn't that kind of person to be doing that kind of thing. But there was a feeling that we were expected to just shrug it off, or be okay with this kind of rumour happening. I think in another way as well, there were many times when I felt I had to temper my emotions, because if I perhaps became, I don't know, overly angry about something or frustrated, the instant reaction from a male colleague would be something along the lines of, oh, it must be your monthly cycle, or, oh, there she goes again, emotional woman. So that kind of thing was actually quite difficult to deal with. If I could have the next slide, please. We can go over to the next slide as well, please. I jumped ahead. Okay, so when I returned to the UK cruise from Mediterranean operations, I moved to work on the smaller vessels, the coastal patrol vessels. Now, these are not really designed to be slept in, although there is a 4-bunk space below deck for emergencies. Now, I was involved in an operation where we had to keep a night watch on a vessel that we'd seized and brought into a harbour. And there were 5 crew total on board, myself as the only woman. Now, on these bunks that were below decks, there were no privacy curtains, absolutely no sort of division for any kind of privacy, male or female. And this meant that there in the middle of that picture is my bed on the wheelhouse floor, which looking back now seems quite amusing, but at the time it wasn't terribly comfortable. And it raised issues with the crew that I was with, because they were concerned about how their wives and girlfriends back home might feel about the sleeping arrangements on board. So that was quite an interesting experience, to have the men actually see that there was a problem with the way things were arranged on board the boats. Next slide, please. Okay, so I stayed on the boats for quite some time, and then unfortunately I sustained a back injury, which meant I had to leave active duty, and I moved into a land-based role at the Maritime Command Centre. This was a fantastic experience for me, because I got to see the other side of the job. So I gained experience in operational tasking, in coordinating operations, as well as crewing work, and some insights into the intelligence side of the job. There were a lot more women in these high-level roles on the land-based side of things, which I found quite interesting. And one small victory that a female colleague and I managed to bring it onto the boats was the introduction of sanitary bins in the bathrooms. So up until last year, there were no facilities for sanitary disposal of sanitary items. So that was quite an achievement to manage to get those items actually placed onto the boats now. Next slide, please. Okay, so I thoroughly enjoyed my time in active duty on the vessels. So despite all the challenges, I absolutely loved the work that I was doing. What I found was when I was working in the UK, the crews were changed quite often each patrol. So I almost had to re-establish myself every patrol as a valued team member and a peer, not just a token female crew member. In the Mediterranean domain, I actually stayed with the same crew for almost the full 2 years, and as a result, the bonds that I developed with my team was incredible. And their reception to me as a female was very different from my previous experience. My commander there was relatively young in sea terms and progressive, so he didn't just see me as a woman, but he saw me as an important integral part of the team. It was during my time on that crew that I received several reward and recognition awards for my work. In particular, my ability to communicate with migrants and show empathy. Through this, I managed to secure intelligence, which was of vital importance to a number of European intelligence agencies. My presence on the boat during rescues, particularly those that involved women and children, was also vital in ensuring calm and measured responses. We had 5 armed Marines on board for our own protection in those operations, and the deck could seem like quite a frightening place to those vulnerable groups. So having my presence there gave them a sense of safety. I showed a very high level of aptitude on watchkeeping duties whilst I was in the Mediterranean, and my commander put me forward for various training opportunities upon my return to the UK. I was initially concerned that I was only being nominated for these opportunities because I was a woman, but I soon realised that I had a genuine aptitude for the work and deserved the assistance in progressing my career options. As a result, I was one of the first women in the fleet to be put through the Royal Yachting Association Offshore Yacht Master course, and prior to my injury, I was on a pathway that would eventually lead to my being a commander on one of the smaller vessels. I also worked towards achieving the accolade of personal safety trainer, so training my peers in the use of restraints, safe baton use, and personal safety techniques. Early last year, I applied for a role within the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, which I felt would suit my interest and my education, my experience, and my passion for this role. I started in post in June, and I've learned so much over the last few months. The main focus of my work now is on capability and capacity building in border and maritime security work in the UK overseas territories, working with other government departments to achieve this. All of my previous operational experience and the network that I developed, as well as the challenges that I've faced, have definitely proved invaluable in the work that I'm doing now, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else can be done. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. What, again, just as an observer here, really, really incredible story. I'm sure some of our other panelists are going to be sharing similar experiences, particularly living on the boats. But just as an observer here, it's really incredible, and I thank you for your commitment and dedication, your thick skin. I know a lot of us have had to grow thick skin, as I said, working in the security sector. But I think obviously your accomplishments are, a testament to your dedication.
Thank you.
So thank you for sharing your story with us. I hope you'll please stick around for the questions and answers at the end. But I am now going to move on to our second panel speaker, Miss Stacey Kirchhoff. We're going to hear a little bit of a Canadian perspective now. Ms. Kirchhoff is the Regional Manager for Marine Security Operations in the Pacific region at Transport Canada. Ms. Kirchhoff, thank you so much for joining us this morning. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank you.
Excellent. Good morning, and thank you. It is an incredible honor to be asked to be amongst the company on this roundtable this week, and the stories I've heard already this morning particularly from our last presenter, have been absolutely amazing and inspiring. So I consider it a great honor to be part of this group today and meeting with you. My story is a little bit different. I've been land-based in the area of marine security for the past several years, and I came up through the ranks at Transport Canada, starting out in quite a junior role after I finished my education, which was an international security degree here in Canada. I moved up through the corporate security world on the land-based side, working internally to the department and working with a variety of different modes. 7 years ago, I transferred over to the security group and have never looked back, or sorry, the marine security group. Have never looked back. I absolutely love working in the marine environment, and I've been incredibly lucky in the role to have taken on here. I've worked as both a marine security inspector, traveling throughout our region and boarding various vessels and working with port authorities and marine facilities throughout the region and the country, before taking on the role of manager of this unit, which has been an absolute pleasure. If we could go to the next slide, please, that would be fantastic. So just to give you a little bit of background of what we do here in Transport Canada Pacific Region, as I said, they're land-based positions where our inspectors go and board both foreign and Canadian vessels to conduct ISPS security inspections, as well as visit marine facilities and ports throughout our region to certify them to receive foreign vessels in Canada. So we're looking for the security threats that might face our maritime environment or enter the Canada through the maritime environment. I would say that 70% of our work is with the ports and marine facilities themselves, with the other 30% being vessel-based. Our particular region does not have a lot of deep-sea Canadian vessels that we inspect. However, we do receive the largest number of foreign deep-sea vessels through our 4 port authorities here in the region. And so we see approximately 1,800 foreign vessels coming in a year, and we try to board 10% of those to conduct security inspections. Okay, so if we could go into the next slide. Like the previous speaker, many of the challenges I'm going to discuss today and the success stories are my own. Some of the other women on my team and within the region and of course nationally might have had different experiences, but I would like to share some of what we've experienced here. While our positions are land-based, so we don't have the same challenges as being on board a vessel, we have seen several barriers to entry in the marine environment for women. One of those is the requirement for frequent travel. Because of that, often women are also caregivers in the home to both children and or elderly family members, and the requirement to travel can be challenging for them when trying to balance all of those responsibilities. In addition to traveling throughout our region, we also have to do dark hours assessments of our facilities. So they're often working long hours and hours that take them into the evening and the night, which can impact the home life. And because of that, we have seen some women who are very highly qualified, reluctant to apply to the positions within our organization because of that perceived lack of balance, which is my second challenge point. There is a fear that women won't be able to balance their work and their personal life, as well as on behalf of the women who are entering that workforce, as well as those who are doing the hiring. And sometimes that's the larger challenge, is we have highly qualified women wanting to join our teams, and those who are doing the boards to hire them will put up an unconscious barrier in thinking that there might be some challenges for them to balance their work and home life, and excuse them in their mind from the competition regardless of their background and skills. Carrying on that theme when it comes to hiring high qualified women into this field are the stereotypes and perceptions of those doing the hiring. As our last speaker alluded to, at times there's the perception that women can be more emotional or perhaps even irrational when they're approaching challenging issues, which of course is a a stereotype that has been disproven again and again. So getting past those barriers to recruit women to both apply and make it through that competition process have been one of the challenges that we've faced over the years. If we could go to the next slide, please. The next challenge I would talk about are the misconceptions around a woman's ability or desire to engage in certain types of work, getting your hands dirty, being in the field. While our jobs are land-based, when we do a security assessment, it often requires that you walk down a ravine or through mud puddles that might be up to your knees or even your thighs. I recall a time walking through a oil and gas facility where we had to bushwhack through a series of brambles in order to assess a fence line. And all of those things, it can be dirty work. You're doing it in all sorts of weather, but women are certainly just as capable and just as willing as the men on the team to go out and engage in those types of work. When it becomes to being treated as an equal alongside male colleagues, I can remember a situation very early in my career when I was an inspector, when an opportunity for 2 inspectors to attend a training course on the other side of the country came up. It was a high-level course that most inspectors did want to attend, but when making the decision, the manager of the time made the assumption, without first consulting with any of the women on the team, that the women would not want to go because the course would take them away from home over Halloween. Ironically, the manager at the time was a woman as well. And she approached the group and said, you know, I've picked 2 of the male counterparts to attend because Halloween is on Tuesday and I know you'll want to be home with your kids that day. To make that sort of well-meaning assumption without actually speaking to the female inspectors is just one of the examples of where they're not necessarily treated as equals amongst their male colleagues. The next one is assumptions regarding some difficult situations. And when we board vessels and when we're out in the field, we're in a position of taking enforcement action against ports, marine facilities, or masters of vessels if they're not complying with the security requirements. There is often a perception that women don't handle conflict or these sorts of difficult situations as well as male counterparts. Unconscious bias, such as a fear that the woman may become too emotional in a conflict situation, or frequently come up creating unintentional biases towards male inspectors. For example, when needing to send an inspector to a vessel where there's likely to be a conflict with the master or crew, managers may unconsciously choose to send the male inspectors without considering the female inspectors to be just as capable. In reality, I have found, managing a team of inspectors, that the women inspectors quite frequently have the ability to diffuse and calm a difficult or a conflict situation more so than their male counterparts. So having a female engage in that level of work is quite often more successful in keeping everybody calm. Cooler heads prevail. In terms of the stakeholders that we work with on a daily basis, there can be symptoms or experience in education which is not directly related to the marine environment. The nature of our work is that we come from a variety of backgrounds, not all directly related to the maritime environment. IT security, facility security, and investigative skills are all valuable skills, and those with experience in this area can be just as valuable as a marine security inspector as someone with specific maritime experience. As I said myself, I was recruited from the corporate security environment and had no experience in the maritime environment when I first joined the team. My skills in corporate security provided the background that I was needed to for much of the position, and I took courses and undertook personal learning to achieve the rest of what was required, and it turned out to be very successful, bringing me in from a different background than some of the others who did have that maritime environment to bring, and provided a mix of skill sets that advanced our program even further. Okay, if we could go to the next slide, please. And this is my last slide of the challenges before I get into some of the success stories. And it is around the requirement to exercise authority over those who may not hold you in high regard or respect you. We have found, particularly when boarding some foreign vessels from areas where women are not yet as advanced in the maritime world as they are within Canada, where they don't want to engage with a female inspector who's in a position of authority. Another personal story that goes back to when I was an inspector and I boarded a foreign vessel with another female inspector to undertake an ISPS security inspection. The master of the vessel was visibly upset to see us and commented to his first officer that he did not have time for these women, gesturing us off the vessel. He then went on a very loud and shouting tirade where he vented that he had too much to do, including disposing of the garbage on the vessel that was more important than speaking to us at the time. Luckily, I was my second or third inspection, having joined the team, and I was with a more experienced colleague who immediately took control of the situation and firmly explained our role, advised the master that we would not be disembarking the vessel. He continued to vent and had a shouted conversation with his vessel agent over the phone and his flag state before returning to us. My female colleague again firmly explained what was required, and we proceeded with the inspection. While he did remain visibly annoyed throughout, we were able to complete the necessary work and disembark the vessel. A second example, again, when I was an inspector boarding a vessel with another female inspector, we were asked to wait at the entrance of the superstructure for an escort to the master's office. While we're waiting, and usually in this scenario, when we're waiting to be escorted to the office, we'll speak to one or two of the crew. We rarely see more than that. While we were waiting, several crew walked by and they all stopped to grin and say hello, and there was a little bit of nudging back and forth going on, which we thought was a little bit unusual, but we brushed it off. Then 5 or so minutes later, at least 10 more crew paraded by, again with grins and nudges, and it became quite clear that a call had gone out that there were female inspectors on board, at which point the crew all came by to check us out. Again, not something typically seen by our male counterparts in the field. And then my third example, again on the same vein, where at times we might be objectified rather than viewed in a position of authority, was when we were inspecting an oil tanker alongside an oil gas facility. We had completed the inspection and were about to disembark, having completed our work, when the first officer and chief engineer came into the room and asked us to stay for tea. This was not unusual. We're quite often asked to stay and engage in a meal or a beverage with the crews, which we always politely decline. So as usual, we politely declined to prepare to leave, at which point one of the crew blocked the door with a grin and a wink and asked us again to stay. We explained again that no, we were government officials and our business required that we disembark the vessel and return to our office. A few more winks, grins, and I will put sexually charged comments were made before they finally stepped aside and we disembarked the vessel. While we didn't necessarily feel unsafe at any point, it is one of the challenges that our male counterparts would not typically have to deal with when boarding a vessel. And then my third and last challenge that I wanted to highlight was overcoming doubts about abilities that are sometimes felt by our stakeholders. The port and marine facility environment, while it is expanding in terms of the number of women working in the field, it is still largely a male-dominated area, particularly when it comes to security. And it's not unusual for me to receive calls from port security officers or marine facility security officers following up on the qualifications or information provided by my female inspectors. I rarely receive these calls when it is a male inspector that has visited the site. Each and every single time the information provided by the female inspectors has been 100% accurate. And once corrected, it usually solves the problem and we move on. If we could go to the next slide, please. Getting into our success stories, though, I am lucky enough to work for a department that is very inclusive and has been very successful in attracting women into marine leadership positions. Our regional director here in the region is a woman, and across the country we have several women in key leadership positions, including the head of our marine safety and security program nationally. 4 to 5 regions in Canada are led by female managers, and that includes our 2 largest ports in Canada, which is here on the Pacific coast where I am. We have the Port of Vancouver and the Port of Montreal on the East Coast. If we could go to the next slide, please. The marine security team that I manage a small team of 10 inspectors, which are highly qualified individuals. 5 of them, so 50%, are female, which is absolutely phenomenal considering that I was only the second female to join the team when I joined a few years ago. We've managed to recruit highly qualified women that come from a variety of backgrounds, several of which have come from a maritime on-board environment as well, and they offer those skills to our team. Within my region, again, I have a female inspector who is the lead inspector at the fastest growing port in Canada, which is in Prince Rupert. And she is dealing daily with high-level officials through our largest stakeholders and container facilities. The largest port in Canada, which is our Port of Vancouver, is also led by a female marine security and has been for the past several years. And that involves, again, high-level meetings with stakeholders, advising them on their requirements and ensuring that our goods and services continue to flow. And if we could go to the next slide, please. And last example, a woman marine inspector is the lead inspector at one of the most contentious marine facilities in Canada, which is our Trans Mountain facility here in the region. It's been contentious in that there has been a significant amount of protest, domestic pushback on this particular facility, which requires that the inspector deal with a high level of conflict and charged situations, which she does exceptionally well, maintaining her calm and has the respect of the marine facility. 3 of my marine inspectors are 3 of the highest regarded inspectors across the country due to their skills and their ability to approach their work with a calm authority that has garnered them a fantastic reputation. Recruitment initiatives have changed over the past few years within Transport Canada, and we've started to stop the stigma attached to assuming that women coming into these positions will not be able to balance their work and home life. And as a result, 50% of the applicants to marine security position in the region are now female. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So some conclusions that I've been able to draw over my time as managing the marine security team. By creating an inclusive environment at Transport Canada, we've managed to attract a wide variety of qualified women into maritime positions, particularly in the area of marine security. We've been able to mitigate concerns around the work-life balance question by keeping our work environment very fluid and flexible. And by that, I mean that we allow the women in the positions to choose when they are or are not able to travel and communicate that, and to work with their colleagues to create their own schedules over the quarters in order to ensure that all of their regulated inspections are completed and they're able to balance the lives themselves, which they've all become very excellent at doing. By becoming an employer of choice and hiring women into high-level positions in marine safety and security, Transport Canada has been able to attract even more high-quality female candidates because it's now turned onto its head and people have seen that there's opportunities for women to advance and grow within our department. As I talk to you today, I would say that we're definitely on the right path when it comes to encouraging the recruitment and development of women in security positions in the marine environment. However, we do still face some of the challenges that I identified, and there's still work to be done to really truly ensure that women have the same opportunities and the same level of recruitment as our male counterparts. Excellent, thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Stacey. Again, for your contributions. I'm sure, like some of the other participants here today, unfortunately, I spent a number of your slides just shaking my head, right? Really just trying to grasp, just the challenges that women continue to have to face on a daily basis. But we applaud your resiliency, your tenacity, and pushing forward. And I'm glad at the end you've highlighted, right, that at the end, women are involved in these leadership positions because of their skill, because of their experience, right? They're being recognized appropriately. Transport Canada is certainly a leader in that way. And we will circle back around to you on some specific recommendations that you can offer our group in a little bit. But thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, please stand by. And I'm going to offer the floor to our third panel speaker. who is Captain Marie Bird. Captain Bird is commander of Coast Guard Sector San Francisco, leading over 850 active and reserve Coast Guardsmen operating 4 cutters, 7 search and rescue stations, an aids to navigation team, a vessel traffic service, and a marine safety detachment. Her area of responsibility spans from the Oregon border to San Luis Obispo County line, as well as much of Nevada, Utah, parts of Wyoming, over 2,500 miles of shoreline within the San Francisco Bay and its tributaries. Captain Bird has also received a number of awards, including the Meritorious Service Medal 3 times, the Coast Guard Commendation Medal, the Coast Guard Achievement Medal, and numerous unit and service awards. Captain Bird, congratulations on your accomplishments. We're very happy to have you join us here today, and I'm pleased to offer you the floor.
Good morning, and thank you, Allison, for that kind introduction. And I also am so honored to be part of today's events and discussion. Thank you to CICTE for the invitation, as well as the opportunity to serve with such distinguished panelists. To begin my discussion, I again want to caveat that, you know, these are my own experiences, but I am very lucky to have been a part of the U.S. Coast Guard, which creates an environment where first generation American, my parents immigrated from the Philippines, could join the Coast Guard directly after high school, spend 5 years in military training, and then have now served the past 25 years as an active duty officer, making my way to the ranks, and now I am the commanding officer of U.S. Coast Guard Sector San Francisco. And so the next couple of slides will discuss what that means in that role. This picture here is a picture of my base at Yerba Buena Island. Yerba Buena Island is an island, natural island on bedrock in the middle of San Francisco Bay. Next slide. So the United States, and for the U.S. Coast Guard, there's 37 U.S. Coast Guard sectors. And of these sectors, they're responsible for their region for maritime safety, security, and stewardship. We're the lead federal agency in those facets. And for the United States, that means to protect 95,000 miles of shoreline, consisting of 361 commercial ports. It results in $4.6 trillion of economic activity. 90% of the United States imports enter and export by ship. And by 2025, worldwide demand for waterborne commerce is expected to more than double. Next slide. And so, as I discussed, I'm the captain of the port and the sector commander of Sector San Francisco. This is a depiction of my area of responsibility. It extends from the California-Oregon border, where I have captain of the port authority and additional authorities that we'll discuss in the next slides. It extends 200 nautical miles westward from the California coast and inland into Lake Tahoe, Nevada, Utah. And we're made up of approximately 700, 800 between officers, enlisted, and civilian, and reserve personnel, and then our voluntary force of 1,500 personnel, the auxiliaries. Next slide. And so to carry out the responsibilities of maritime safety, security, and environmental protection in the sector of San Francisco zone, I have 7 small boat stations, and they are at Bodega Bay, at Station Golden Gate, Station San Francisco, Station Monterey, Station Vallejo, Station Rio Vista, and Station Lake Tahoe. There's also 4 patrol boats, and those are 1 in Bodega Bay, 1 in Monterey, and 2 in there at Yerba Buena Island, co-located with Sector San Francisco. I also have an aids to navigation unit that monitors the aids that are like the traffic signs in the water, so that the deep draft as well as commercial and other recreational vessels understand for rules of the road, as well as a marine safety detachment in Humboldt Bay in Eureka, California, to the north of San Francisco Bay. Next slide. And also to carry out our missions of search and rescue as well as coastal security, we have the assets that we work with a separate commanding officer at Coast Guard Air Station Sacramento with the fixed wings, as well as Coast Guard Air Station San Francisco with the helicopters. Next slide. And so most personnel are familiar with the city of San Francisco. City of San Francisco is a worldwide vacation destination. And then within the Bay, we host many high visibility marine events such as America's Cup. But not only is the Bay used for recreational sailing, but there is the commercial vessels that call into Oakland. There are the deep draft tanker vessels that call into Richmond, Benicia, and Martinez. There are the ferries that run as commuter ferries all around the Bay, as well as the sightseeing vessels that are also pre-COVID were also using the Bay as sightseeing for many of our visitors. But there is also the second largest ammunition seaport in the world, where we assist Department of Defense with ensuring that ammunition and supplies are delivered via ship to the Pacific Theater. And of course, all of this is through the bottleneck that is at the Golden Gate Strait. So it's a very busy bay. It's and within that, everyone wants access, both the commercial use of the bay as well as the recreational use of the bay. And so we will manage over 1,000 marine events to ensure for safety for those that either want to use the bay for a regatta or for a military exercise. And we balance that with the 3rd largest ferry system in the United States after New York and Seattle, Washington. Next slide. This is a AIS, automatic identification system, that our deep draft vessels are required to have on if you're operating in our waterways. And what some may not realize is San Francisco Bay leads into the Sacramento River as well as San Joaquin River. And there are 2 deep draft ports in Sacramento and Stockton that help to support goods in California's Central California agricultural region. And the agricultural region is responsible for 40% of our nation's fruits, nuts, and other table foods, and produces 1/4 of the United States food. And so between the export of those via boat, as well as supporting construction and for inland California. Next slide. For the 37 sectors, each of the sector commanders have authorities to ensure for safety on the water, security of the ports, as well as environmental protection. And the next slides will discuss what those authorities are. Next slide. As captain of port, those are my most extensive authorities, and I use that authority to control vessel movements, to establish safety and security zones, to control access to vessels and facilities, to enforce the rules and regulations, both law enforcement as well as for search and as well as SOLAS and MARPOL. We use it to conduct searches and investigations to marine accidents, as well as ensure for the safety of marine events. This is an example of the diversity of vessels that need access to the bay. Next slide. Sector San Francisco is the busiest search and rescue Coast Guard sector in the United States. There is a false sense of security that you will only be entering the water of the bay. You're not actually going offshore in the Pacific Ocean. Yet people don't realize that the water is extremely cold. The tides and currents are very swift, as well as the fog. And there's many points by which to enter San Francisco Bay, and we run at over 1,000 search and rescue cases in a year. And for the boats and the stations that I had discussed in the first slide, we accomplished that through dispatching those search and rescue units from the command center at Yerba Buena Island, and we coordinate with our state and local partners. When we make the urgent marine information bulletin that there's a confirmed person in the water, many of our other governmental agencies, everyone responds because time is not on our side if there's a person in the water for the factors I discussed. The water is too cold, and every second counts. Next slide. To the discussion for this group here, after the tragedy of 9/11, Coast Guard Captain of Ports were given the role of Federal Maritime Security Coordinator. And with that, we lead the Regional Area Maritime Security Committee to enforce ISPIS and MITSA regulations that also came out of 9/11 through IMO. And we also conduct our law enforcement operations through our sector's boarding team and address maritime threat responses. With this role, I was in Honolulu when 9/11 happened, and the Coast Guard, I was in the planning department role and as the planning department head. And as the Coast Guard and as our counter signatories to IMO, which is the maritime arm of the United Nations, came together to enforce and to develop the International Ship and Port Security regulations, as well as the Maritime Transportation Security Amendments, which my colleague had spoke to, and to conduct onboard vessels as well as facilities. But before those had come into effect, organizing the port team in Honolulu as far as how we were going to handle coastal security for all the vessels that were using Honolulu as a fuel refueling station as they were coming from the Far East or the West Coast of America was something that my team developed first out of planning as far as what does that look like absent of any regulations, and the coordination and collaboration that was required with our industry partners, as well as our recreational harbor masters. And then when I shifted to Port State Control, which is the Foreign Vessel Inspections branch, developing the Notice of Arrival regulations, and what that processing looked like was one of the innovative practices that we were able to share with Coast Guard headquarters, because Honolulu was one of the ones that developed a successful means of vessel agents to provide 96 hours notice of arrival, and establishing what that process would be so that we could begin the vetting of the personnel on board as well as the cargo on board. Next slide. Sector commanders also are established the authority of Federal On-Scene Coordinator. And this came out of the Exxon Valdez oil spill in Alaska in 1990. And as a result of the Oil Pollution Act the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, because of the Exxon Valdez oil spill. And with this, it's very similar to the coordination of the Security Committee. The regulations were developed to establish expectations for commercial vessel operators, for the ability to demonstrate that they can respond to pollution events, and that they have coordinated with oil spill response organizations, qualified and vetted and approved by the Coast Guard, and that if there was a report of an oil spill in our navigable waters, then the Coast Guard works in partnership with our local, state, and other federal agencies to stabilize the situation, mitigate further damage to the environment or to wildlife, and then carry out through with the investigation. And so in this role, the Coast Guard leads the Area Contingency Planning Committee, so that we all are on the same page as far as geographic, determining our sensitive sites and what are going to be the geographic strategies for those sensitive sites, such as boom deployment and exercising that boom, those planned boom deployments in advance of a oil spill. Next slide. And then the officer in charge of marine inspections. Regrettably, I bring up some of these authorities because they stem from a tragedy. And so again, after the Titanic tragedy, IMO came together to develop agreed upon vessel structural integrity, engineering requirements, life-saving appliances. And so from those agreed upon global regulations, then the role of officer in charge of marine inspections is how we ensure that not only for foreign vessels that call into the United States, but for our domestic vessels. So to ensure for compliance with engineering, life-saving, structural integrity requirements as it deals with their vessel plans. And then also dealing with novel marine engineering systems, such as green technology of use of hydrogen, fuel cells, lithium-ion batteries, and the use of LNG as fuel. All of those are initiatives that the maritime industry is working towards to affect global emissions from vessels. And the Coast Guard trains our personnel to ensure that we are up to speed with these new initiatives. And then regrettably, if we need to deploy our investigators to investigate a marine accident or casualty. Next slide. So I just want to go through these quickly because I'm unclear if I'm already going over time, but I do just want to say that with regards to the Coast Guard in Sector San Francisco's area of responsibility is unable to accomplish this on our own. And so I am very lucky to work with other federal, state, and local agencies that want the same thing that we want. They also want safety in the maritime environment, security of our ports, and mitigate any threat of environmental pollution. Next slide. And lastly, this is a snapshot of me with some of our crew in front of Station San Francisco. That's the view outside my window. Those are the cranes at the Port of Oakland that you can see in the far background. Next slide. Or you can conclude that. Okay. And so I think that with regards to what was brought up by my colleagues as far as challenges and successes, I think that I can share those same, again, this is my experience, but the first 2 years out of the academy, you're required to spend 2 years underway on a Coast Guard cutter. And I was lucky that I was not the only female, that I actually was with a cadre of 5 other women. And I think that if there were any of those types of situations that we had each other to lean on. And then after serving the 2 years on board the cutter, I chose to do the landside facet of the Coast Guard. And I was a marine inspector, and as my colleague had mentioned, that when you go on board vessels where perhaps the countries are not as progressive as the United States, where I would also be dismissed, especially where most of the foreign vessels have a Filipino as their crew. And so when a Filipino marine inspector from the US Coast Guard arrives, Filipino-American, excuse me, I was born in New York, but the same kind of dismissive tone that you do have to work through and understand and assert that you're here to ensure that the vessel is in compliance with international laws. But I would like to just share that at the end of the day, as far as opportunities, I am very lucky because the US Coast Guard has at every opportunity presented to me that the ball has kind of been in my court and to determine how far I want to achieve in this organization and to have earned the role of captain in the port of Sector San Francisco is one that I think that for all of us share. You have, you demonstrate with hard work, you have your mentors, and there are sacrifices that you have to make as well. So with that, I will hand it back to Ms. Treppel.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Again, I'm really struck by the breadth and scope of experience that we've been able to hear from this morning. I wonder if my other panelists could join me. Carla, Stacy, if you could join us on the screen, please. We have just a few minutes remaining for some questions and answers. Hopefully you're still with us.
No, they're coming in, Allison.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Again, we've only got 10 or 15 minutes left remaining, but again, I want to thank the three of you for joining us here this morning, for sharing your experience. Like I said before, but it's worth repeating, I personally found it very inspiring, and I'm sure you have inspired the other participants that are here as well. So that's going to sort of lead me into my first question, and I think you all mentioned it to a certain degree, right? But the importance of mentoring, and you've referenced looking towards mentors, but I'm sure you have also served as a mentor to young women or junior professionals who are just getting into this field. And so I would ask you, what could you say to them? What recommendation would you have, knowing that we're making good progress, we're making good improvements, and seeing a little bit more of a gender balance going forward. But I wonder if you have any specific recommendations or suggestions that you would share with young women, young professionals starting out in this field. Anyone?
I'm happy to jump in on that one, if that's okay.
Please.
I think the key recommendation that I would have is to not let a fear of your own limitation or the idea of limitations as a woman in the industry stop you from pushing forward and taking the risks. I think it's really important to keep plugging away and sort of keep working towards something if you really, really want it, and to sort of go of those maybe being given opportunities just because you're a woman. I would say seize those opportunities and make the most of them, and just really don't give up, and don't let words of men or even other women in your life stop you from going towards what you really, really want in this industry.
I'm nodding along with Carla. That is excellent advice. And I would say the same thing to some of the women that have come and approached me about the work. And also to say, don't be afraid to think outside of the box when it comes to their own abilities and what that they can achieve. And quite often, women that I've spoken to about, oh, I could never do what you do. Absolutely, you could do what we do. So don't limit yourself. Don't put yourself into that box. And as you start to think sky's the limit, it's a little bit amazing just how much you can achieve and the opportunities that start to present themselves when you take yourself out of that mindset.
And to carry on with my colleagues, I would say two things. So the U.S. Coast Guard is a very small service. And so not only is, you do not burn bridges because everyone knows each other, or 7 degrees of separation, but I always say to protect your service reputation with 100%, because your service reputation is what's going to open doors for you. And if your service reputation is tarnished in any manner, because it is such a competitive billets that other people are going to want, that you need to ensure that you protect that, protect your name, protect your service reputation, and perform in a manner as such. And then the only thing I would say is model how you would want as far as working with our female colleagues. I only share that sometimes you would think that we have each other's back, of course. And so I did have one experience where I was working with a female colleague where just female male, when you have a bad shipmate situation and you're just bad shipmate. And I know that I lead in for my sector that just is not going to be tolerated. And we create a kind of environment where we lift each other up. You don't need to put someone down in order for you to succeed. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I would argue, right, again, we all need to lift each other up all the time. So that's definitely a message worth repeating. So, and sticking with the same line of recommendations, and again, I'm very mindful and appreciative of the leadership positions that the three of you have achieved in your respective governments. And so here I'm putting on my multilateral hat, right, as a representative of the Organization of American States, where we really do work to support our member states in a number of different ways, primarily to help develop their capacities and to develop policies or strategies to support implementation of those capacities. And so here, again, I'm very sensitive that you are still representing your government. So, but just in general, I wonder if, again, just based on your road traveled and the road still left to travel, what, if any, recommendations would you have for governments as they're formulating strategy, particularly how to have a gender balanced approach, gender-focused strategy in the marine maritime environment? Is there a specific recommendation or suggestion you could make to governments in general, not necessarily your own? Anybody want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah,
Carla.
I'll
Okay.
I've got a few actually. I think that there needs to be a much clearer career.
We have lost your volume, Carla. Carla?
Carla, we don't hear you. Carla, we don't hear you. I don't think she's
And
somewhere.
she doesn't hear us either. Oh, you're back. You're back. Sorry, we lost your volume for a while there. Sorry. Can you start again, please?
Of course. So I've got a few ideas. One of those key ones, I think, is about the importance of implementing education pathways and proper career mapping for professional development for women within the industry. Now, whether that's through targeted advertising campaigns or just raising general awareness, even at sort of secondary school level, where I mean, I had no idea this kind of work even existed when I was at school. And, you know, it's quite possible I would have made some different decisions had I known this kind of thing was available to me. So education and clear career progression is very important. And I also think we need to identify our role models and promote them on a much wider scale. So events like this are absolutely fantastic. But I think we need to have those role models more obviously in the public eye to inspire those people that are maybe considering a move into this career or into this arena. I think those are quite important things. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Stacey?
I think Carla makes some excellent points, and I'm thinking of some of the recruitment strategies that we've started to undertake, and yes, putting women in leadership positions out into some of the events in the field, career talks, and educating the upcoming youth as they come through their education programs on what positions are available to them. And like Carla just said, I had no idea that that this career path actually existed. I knew from quite a young age I wanted to work in international security, but I didn't know the breadth of different programs that were available to do that. And it's a much wider field than I ever anticipated. So getting that information out there just on the types of positions that are available to women, to everyone in the marine environment, to get people focused on that, I think will attract a lot of highly skilled young women wanting to tailor their education towards coming into these types of positions.
Thank you. Marie?
Yes, and then again, similar as my colleagues, the industrial and port area, I was born in New York, but grew up in Southern California. You're not at the port facilities unless you have a reason to be there. So most people don't really understand like what happens at the Port of LA and Long Beach or Port of Oakland. And so to have any sort of exposure to what is available in that industry, again, is either through college fairs, this education that needs to start at secondary school. Here in America, there's a maritime arm of the Boy Scouts. It's called the Sea Scouts. And so it builds under the framework of the Boy Scouts, but if you lean towards a maritime interest, I know that there is a lot of exposure to either enter the Navy, Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard through that route. But beyond that targeted recruitment that needs to occur, that exposure, unless you know someone in the family that worked in maritime, I know that it's a tough connect because a lot of people just do not understand what happens at the port.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely concur that my exposure to this whole environment was very limited until I took this job. So I think there's a lot of awareness raising that needs to happen at all levels, but agree that getting into the secondary school curriculum is an excellent way to do that. So unfortunately, we have run out of time. I say unfortunately for the rest of us who I think could continue to listen to you all and your experiences, certainly for a few more hours, but I'm sure you're all relieved to have gotten through this panel. So we're really grateful again for your participation, for your time. Again, on behalf of the OAS, on behalf of all of the participants here, we thank you all for sharing your experience, sharing your stories. You've given us all a lot of hope and optimism for promoting a more gender balanced approach in the maritime and port environment. So thank you very much again.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And to the rest of you all, we are going to be taking just a short break. We're pretty much on schedule. We have a 10-minute break scheduled, but I'm going to ask you all to come back at noon on the dot. So 5 minutes just to turn off your cameras, take a quick break, and we'll be back here with our second panel at noon. Thank you so much. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We are ready to begin our second and final panel session for today. Over the next hour, we are going to look specifically at opportunities for women working in the maritime and port sector in our region. And we have two panelists who are going to speak with us again for the next 30 minutes or so. And then we will also have time for questions and answers before we wrap up today at 1 o'clock. So let me begin by introducing another one of my colleagues, Mona Svoboda. Mona, please join me online. Mona is a program manager at the Inter-American Committee on Ports, SIP, where she designs, implements, and monitors high-impact port development programs. With special emphasis on comprehensive port systems, Mona helps to create synergies between public and private industry leaders to facilitate the development of competitive, resilient, and integrated maritime and port sectors in the Western Hemisphere. Prior to, prior to joining the OAS in 2014, Mona worked in international development with the German Development Agency in Asunción, Paraguay, with the German Honduran Chamber of Commerce in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, as well as supporting other areas of the General Secretariat. Mona, it is great to see you. Haven't seen you for over a year now. Nice to see my colleagues online. Thanks for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Alison, for the kind introduction, and thank you so much for SICTE and the UK government for the invitation. I am thrilled to be here and part of this important meeting, and very inspired by the stories I heard of my colleagues earlier this morning. So I will be speaking today in a little bit more general terms about the opportunities for women in the port sector in the region. And given my background, I will focus on the port sector of the hemisphere. Next slide, please. Before I do that, I will just briefly introduce to you the OAS Inter-American Committee on Ports, sister organization of SICTE. For those of you who don't know us, we represent the national port authorities of the 35 sovereign nations of the Americas, and we work under 4 pillars. Our work is mandate-based. One of our mandates is fostering and promoting political port dialogue. We do that at the highest ministerial level. And the majority, or I would say the largest chunk of our time and our resources goes into our capacity building program. We also offer, last year we offered over 400 scholarships to attend professional port development trainings. And we also have gender-specific trainings. I will leave my email address and contact information at the end of the presentation for those of you who are interested. Please feel free to reach out to me. We also assist our member states on specific projects. They range from updating port legislation to developing tools on how to certify your port as a green port. So it's a wide variety there. And then last but not least, we have a strong private sector participation in the committee, as we believe to really have to bring in together all stakeholders in the maritime and port industry to really holistically promote port development in the region. Next slide, please. Here you can see really briefly our 6 priority areas. We call them tags, technical advisory groups. I see the image is a little bit small, but I hope you can read it. So you will see that our priority areas range from logistics and innovation, public policy and legislation, inland ports and waterways, especially important for the Southern Cone, environmental protection and sustainable port management, port security, and then you will see down here at the bottom our technical advisory group on social responsibility, gender equality, and empowerment of women. And I think it's important to highlight here that the committee, from when it was founded, has integrated gender as a cross-cutting mandate and even elevated it to one of the priority areas as a tag. Next slide, please. These are some of our associate members and strategic partners, and I would just briefly like to highlight our collaboration with WISTA, the Women's International Shipping and Trading Association. We have an MOU with them and particularly collaborate in the field of capacity building. We also have a collaboration with MAMLA, which is the network for women working in Latin American maritime authorities. And you can also see here the World Maritime University and the IMO. As I mentioned earlier, we offer scholarships for female port officials in the region to attend a 2-week course instructed by the IMO for women in port management. Unfortunately, last year, due to the pandemic, that was not able to take place. But again, feel free to reach out to me if you would like further information on that. And then, of course, in addition to our associate members and private sector partners, we also collaborate with our sister organization here at the OAS SICTE, and also with the Inter-American Commission on Women. We partner with them on a Outstanding Women in Maritime Award that we award each year to one woman in the port sector to highlight her significant contributions to the port development in the region. Next slide, please. And next slide. Thank you. So, yes, I would like to talk today a little bit about some of the industry trends and how they present an opportunity for a greater integration of women into the port and maritime industries. So when tackling women's persistent underrepresentation in the port industry, it's important to examine what the implications this underrepresentation has for the sector. So I would just like to take a moment to take a look at the numbers here. As we all know, we hear this number quite often. The IMO finds that only 2% of seafarers are women. If we take a closer look at the port and maritime industry, the UNCTAD Maritime Transportation Review, in fact, includes gender as one of its 6 port performance scorecard indicators, not only to measure women's representation in the port workforce, but also to measure a port's overall efficiency. And I think that's important that gender is here included as a performance indicator. And the research, or their 2019 research, shows that globally only around 17% of the port workforce are women. If we take a look at the region in Latin America and the Caribbean, only 15% of Port Authority personnel is female. And in operations and cargo handling, the numbers are even lower, with women only representing around 5% in the region. And while UNCTAD doesn't offer any specific data on port security personnel, I think we can assume that the numbers here are just as low. And what do these findings suggest, or what do these numbers suggest? They suggest that women continue to face significant barriers that prevent them from fully participating as professionals across all fields of the sector. Next slide, please. Thank you. And while generally speaking, the need for gender diversity has long been recognized across sectors, we know that women are still underrepresented, not only in the port and maritime industries, but in general in political and economic leadership. However, women's full participation in leadership and decision-making processes is key in boosting socioeconomic prosperities. And this is an interesting data here. Per the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, global gross domestic product could increase by more than 25% by 2025 if women play the same role in the labor market as men. And I think that number just speaks for itself. But promoting gender equality and diversity not only brings financial benefits. Societies with greater levels of women's participation are more peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable. These are also findings from the United Nations. And consequently, empowering women to become central actors with social, economic, and organizational agency has to be at the core of the 21st century development strategies in our countries. And there is a general lack of specific research for the maritime and port industry, but these findings here, they strongly suggest that port and maritime businesses with higher levels of women's participation in leadership will most certainly outperform those without. And in this context, it's important to balance the gender ratio of port employees for managerial and operational positions. And that is not only crucial in terms of gender equality and women's empowerment. In fact, it's smart economics that will boost growth. Next slide, please. We know that when women hold leadership positions, knowledge sharing and permanent communication with other female leaders or those interested in pursuing a career in the sector become an integral part of their professional activities. However, the lack of such networking opportunities is often described by women as one of the barriers that prevents them from achieving full participation in the industry. And here I would just like to highlight a few international as well as regional port and maritime organizations that have put forth programs and initiative mentor programs to address the gender ratio imbalance in the port sector. I'm sure many of you here are familiar with the IMO Gender Program. It was launched over 30 years ago, and in fact, the IMO Gender Program in collaboration with WISTA are now obtaining obtaining data on women's participation in the industry, which will then help inform the development of more inclusive strategies. The growing number of women-centered maritime and port organizations such as WISTA, Red Mamla, or WEMAC suggests that female port and maritime officials seek opportunities to share knowledge on related issues, develop networking opportunities, and also establish permanent communication channels among each other. And this not only results in them having greater visibility for their contributions in the sector, but it also helps provide better access to information for young female professionals interested in pursuing a career in the maritime industry. And I think that's something we heard earlier in the presentations, the importance of providing access to information on the career opportunities in the maritime and port industry. Another important focus of these organizations is the promotion of quantitative and qualitative assessments of female representation in port and maritime organizations. Through these gender-specific data collections, decision makers can then establish a baseline to help attract and harness female talent and provide better access to industry fields previously not easily accessible for women. And this also includes the development and implementation of inclusive training and capacity building initiatives with gender as a cross-cutting focus. Next slide, please. So now let's take a look at some of the industry trends, and especially in our region, and what they mean for the empowerment of women and the promotion of gender equality in this sector. We know that the development of a smart port sector with maritime single windows and port community systems on the rise. Antigua and Barbuda just launched their maritime single window. Jamaica has their PCS implemented, soon to be followed by Peru and Barbados. We know that these trends towards a more automated and digitalized sector require new skills and mindsets. So in the course of this trend, the sector will continue to shift from a strenuous physical working environment to one that requires more innovative soft skills, including information technology aptitude. And this will, of course, greatly shape the industry's future and can significantly attract women to see career opportunities when and if they are provided with up-to-date and accessible training. Automated cargo handling or remote security processes, for instance, may erase real and or perceived physical barriers for female port officials. And that also helps rethink and redefine or even define new roles within the port workforce. And that can then foster much better access for women in the industry. Consequently, and this is important, these modernization efforts in the port sector, they present a significant strategic opportunity for the promotion of gender equality and the empowerment of women. And providing equal opportunities for all genders in all fields of port management and operations results in a greater pool of human capital that can positively contribute to the industry's performance. And I think that is an argument that we have to make with our leadership. And to achieve this, to improve our industry's efficiency, our port's efficiency, decision makers must translate comprehensive inclusive strategies into actionable policies on both the institutional and the national levels, of course. And these necessary legislative updates in light of the current port modernization plans, they need to consider, and I mentioned this earlier, they need to consider gender as a cross-cutting issue in order to not only be more comprehensive, but to also be more effective. Next slide, please. So here are some takeaways. While we still, and we heard this earlier in the presentation, we still face many challenges in terms of gender equality in the sector, but we are also at a point in time that presents a unique opportunity for more inclusive strategies. as the port and maritime industries continue to modernize not only their processes, operation, and management, but also their governance, decision makers are presented with an opportunity to facilitate women's integration in a more effective manner, including through the updated legislation that is required for these developments. And it's important to remember that all investments in infrastructure and operational updates, they have to be aligned with capacity building and training. And here, gender must be a cross-cutting issue. Improving the gender ratio of port employees in both operational and managerial functions is both fundamental to promoting equality and women's empowerment and the competitiveness and efficiency of the industry. So in order to maximize the modernization efforts in the sector, decision and policy makers need to provide equal opportunities to participate in this modernization process through sound inclusive strategies. Because we want to be participating and we want to shape these processes with equal access. And when we understand female participation as vital to the sector's and industry's performance, then the formulation of guidelines and policies to facilitate and amplify women's access becomes much more effective. And just as a conclusion, for any modern business, it's vital to encourage and empower female talent, and the port and maritime industry may be behind, but as stakeholders redefine industry trends, redefine requirements, redefine roles, or even create new roles and responsibilities within the port workforce in the context of modernization, women's contributions will continue to shape the industry's way forward and, of course, favorably impact its future. Next slide, please. And so with that, I thank you. I leave here my contact information if you would like to receive further information on some of our trainings that we offer. And I also invite you to take a look at our website, portalsip.org, where you can find more information on some of our gender activities. And last but not least, you see here our SIP magazine, and we have an issue that is specifically focused on empowerment of women in the port sector. So that may also be of interest to you. And thank you again so much for the invitation. It's inspiring to be here, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Simona. We really appreciate you joining us here today. You've added some more food for thought as we continue our reflections on this incredibly important area. Please don't go away. We're going to wrap up. I mean, you can turn off your video for right now, but we will wrap up with some questions and answers at the end. We hope you will be available for that. But let me now turn to our second panelist, Miss Ricky Lambie, who I hope will join me here on screen. Miss Lambie is a Port State Control Officer for the Belize Port Authority, where she's responsible for inspecting foreign vessels entering Belizean waters against international safety and security standards. Additionally, she conducts marine casualty incidents to identify the causes of the casualties and provide solutions to prevent future mishaps. She attended the prestigious World Maritime University in Malmö, Sweden, and just recently, last year, earned her master's degree in maritime affairs. She's recently returned to Belize, where she continues to act as Port State Control Officer, now supervising 3 field offices. Ms. Lambie continues to emphasize and promote awareness of the safety regime and the importance of establishing quality standards and policies within the industry. It is definitely an honor and privilege to have you here with us today. Ms. Lambie, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Ricky Lambie, and I'm a Port State Control Officer with the Belize Port Authority. And today I'll be speaking about the challenges and opportunities available for women in our region based on my observations and my personal journey to the World Maritime University. Prior to acquiring my job at the Port Authority, I was actually unaware of the maritime industry in Belize its importance, and the job opportunities that existed within it. And as the years went by, I realized that this is a case for many individuals in my country. Many are unaware of the industry, and as a result, they lack appreciation for it. Then when I became a part of the industry, I noticed that a segregation of roles existed. Few women were in technical roles, and little room was there for women to venture off into the technical field. For example, in my field, in the Caribbean, the ratio of female port state control officers to male port state control officers is actually very wide. And this goes for many other field-oriented areas in the sector. It seems the belief prevails that women in the sector are solely to be in administrative roles, which may be an unfair restriction unless that is the woman's choice. Another challenge that we face specifically in Belize is that we don't have a maritime institute. There is not even mention of maritime in our educational institutions. So women in the country cannot further our education physically from within Belize. So they must seek educational opportunities outside, and sourcing funding for international and regional opportunities can be quite difficult for all women within the Caribbean. However, all hope is not lost. Personally, I was able to attend a WEMAC conference that brought brilliant women from all around the Caribbean for women empowerment engagement. And there I was extremely fortunate to meet Mr. Colin Young and Ms. Helen Bunning, and they assisted me in attending a Flag State Inspector course, which I had completed with the highest merits, and it gained me recognition and allowed me to, and I was advised to actually apply to World Maritime University. Thanks to them and my donor, the IMO, I was admitted and awarded a full scholarship where I acquired my master's degree in maritime affairs. While I was there, I actually had the full support of my BPA colleagues, specifically my fellow port state control officers, which aided in my completion. So this experience helped me to identify new avenues for opportunities and recommendation for growth for women in the maritime sector. Firstly, I would encourage all women in the sector to join either a local or regional or international women empowerment organization, such as WEMAC, WINSTA, UN Women, or Gender at Work, and assist in the mission to gain recognition for women in the maritime. These same organizations are actually gateways to scholarship and networking opportunities for women. While being a member, I would suggest that you connect with a woman that you feel can be a great mentor to you, and also become a mentor to fellow mentees. We become better and excel when we share knowledge and assist each other. Another recommendation is for organizations within our regions to actually commit to investing in educational opportunities for women. It's of utmost importance that our organization actually commit via policy to investing in scholarship opportunities. Furthermore, there needs to be investment in technical skills as well, and a creation of more opportunities in the field. Currently in Belize, a curriculum is being developed for maritime to be introduced in the educational system at a tertiary level. So we should be seeing meaningful changes in the near future and more forthcoming later on. As for women in the region, I would suggest when it comes to educational opportunities, you research and you apply to universities such as the World Maritime University, the Caribbean Maritime Institute, the University of Trinidad and Tobago, and Lloyd's Maritime Academy. There's also grants I've seen such as the FernCant grant and the ACMF CANTA full tuition grant. Additionally, some organizations within the Caribbean offer maritime scholarships to their national. So that is an avenue that should be considered as well by researching what your own government has to offer. So while there are many challenges that I feel we face as women in the industry, I do believe that there is change for hope. There is hope for change and growth in the industry, but it will be up to us to work together to assist each other in increasing awareness of the industry, attracting more women, and educating ourselves and the relevant policymakers about the value of our contribution and the need to establish educational opportunities for women within the industry. Thank you for listening and thank you for this opportunity. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. Great to hear a lot of the same lines of thought repeated. I think we're starting to see some repeated message, which underscores to me their importance, right? Again, I'm struck here by several of our speakers mentioning just a general lack of awareness of opportunities in the maritime and port domain. So just flagging this for some follow-up thought. Also, there seems to be a common consensus that there is a need for greater educational opportunities, particularly secondary school. I noticed there was a question in the chat about this as well. So I think, again, I'm putting on my facilitator hat here. Specific ideas that any of you may have about, I heard college fairs, that was an interesting idea. How do we get this into school curriculums? These are things that I think we would like to be able to continue to follow over the course of this roundtable discussion. And I was equally struck, Ricky, by your comments again on mentoring and the role of women who are here, right? Both their dependence on mentors who have helped to guide them in their career paths, but also ours, and I'm including myself as in all with the maritime domain, right? But women in maritime, their responsibility, I would call it, quite honestly, to guiding and mentoring younger junior professionals in this field. So I think we've got some good ideas and recommendations going forward. I'm just quickly scanning here to see if there are any other questions that have come from the audience. I think we've got a good perspective. Again, my colleague Mona from the Inter-American Committee on Ports, again, is sharing a little bit about the OAS perspective on what we've seen in the region, some good data and indicators. I think she's joining me here again for some follow-up, but we also heard, again, from one specific member state, Belize, and Ricky's experience working in this field. So I'm wondering if you both can join on screen just for a little follow-up.
Ricky has to request the floor, please.
Yes, and apologies on my end. I think I'm having some connectivity issues here. Allison, I will just dive in. I think I would like to congratulate Ricky on her presentation and sharing with us her experience. I think it showed just some of the barriers women still face, you know, not knowing of the diversity that the port and maritime industry offer. I think sometimes we are so far disconnected from the maritime and port industry, and especially if we look at our region, there's only 2 countries who don't have access to the ocean, but they have their inland ports and their waterways, and it's just, I mean, 95% of all goods worldwide go through a port. So there is so much opportunity, and there is so much opportunity and diversity within the sector itself. And I think we just need to really create that awareness and showcase some of the experiences that we have. And I think a forum like this is such an important opportunity to do that. And then I would just like to conclude with the importance of training, and we can't stress this enough. Training is also empowerment. When I feel like I've received the tools, up-to-date knowledge and information, then I feel empowered in doing my job with pride, with initiative, and just confidence. And I think that's just really important for our leadership to be mindful of the gender perspective when it comes to training.
Ricky, did you want to add to that?
Yes, sorry just now for I had connectivity issues. But yes, I think in the industry, it takes us all working together to actually increase awareness and helping out each other. Because like I said, I was extremely fortunate that I came across Miss Helen Bunny, and although she refused to take my acknowledgement, she always says I did it on my own. Had I not met her, I don't think I would have been able to been on this course to show that what I was capable of, and then being able to attend the university and acquire a scholarship. So I think it comes down to we actually have to help each other and see each other as fellow counterparts rather than our competition, and also engage in outreach programs to let more female know about the industry. I know for us, before COVID, we have actually started to do job fairs, and we're trying to do events on World Maritime Day and have female from our organization present there and go to the secondary schools. So we're making changes. We just hope we were able to attract more and we're able to move a little bit faster. Because like I said, had I not been freshly out of school looking for a job, I probably would not have ended up in maritime, because it was not something that we're aware of while we're at school.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to switch a little bit the scope of my question here. So we're looking at challenges, and challenges specifically that women face in the port or maritime environments. And hopefully you have the opportunity to hear from our the three speakers on the first panel, and you heard, again, I understand they were their individual experiences. They were very clear about that. But I think I would feel comfortable saying certainly at least some of the examples they shared would likely be common issues that women in this industry have faced. And so, we've highlighted some of the challenges, whether it's, the work-life balance issue, the assumptions, even some of the physical challenges that women have faced. And so I'm wondering if either of you have any thoughts, as we talk about the need to create inclusive environments and creating greater awareness. So not how do we make make women aware of maritime opportunities, but how do we help men working in this industry? What's their role to contributing to this inclusive environment? It's a culture change for sure, I'm sure. And, if you're here listening, we would very much welcome your thoughts and feedback. It's reasonable to think that they may not even be aware of the bias, intentional or not, that they may be bringing to the job every day. And so, again, just wondering if you have any general thoughts, if you, you particularly, Ricky, working day to day in the field in this environment, what would you say to colleagues? Again, not necessarily in Belize. I'm not trying to put any government on the spot here, right? But just men in general, what could we say to them just to help them reflect a little bit more on what their role is to contributing to a more inclusive environment?
I think their role is that they need to help us dismiss the segregation of roles, and it's going to be up to us, I guess, to help educate them that you need to let me show you my capability of what I can do and not determine what I can do based on my gender. Let me show you what I'm capable of. And I've had it here when that was actually one of my biggest challenge, because when I became a port state control officer, I was the second female to be in this position. So the men some of the men viewed us as delicate. You're not supposed to go in the lifeboat because it's dangerous, or we'll do this or we'll do that. And what I did was I stood my ground and I told them I'm going to do it because I can do it and I'm going to show you that I can. So I think we have to, there's some of them, I think they believe they're being gentlemen by taking the hard stuff for us. So we're going to have to show them that we are capable. You don't have to protect us. We don't need to be protected. We can do this. So I guess it's working with them and trying to explain to them about how they can actually be better, because some of them seems like they do have no problem with us being in the industry. They just don't understand that we don't need to be protected, that we're fine, we're actually capable of doing the work.
Mona, any thoughts or no?
No, I'm just impressed and inspired by your story, Riki. I think you mentioned something that's really important. And Allison, you said that earlier too. It requires a cultural shift, and that is always difficult. You know, there are just these historically well-established roles within the port industry, and I think it's important. We need to know where we are before we know where we're going. So we would also recommend maritime and port organizations to assess the gender ratio in their organizations, look at the representation when it comes to job levels, different positions, where are more women, where are less women, because without that baseline that then helps us inform the development of more inclusive strategies, we don't really know where we're going. And so I think a first step would be, and here of course we need the support of the men,
Yes,
is to assess where are we at, and then you can make more informed decisions of where you want to go.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, I'm just looking quickly. We may just be wrapping up this session a little earlier than we had anticipated, which is fine. I do know there's some questions in the chat just specifically about making the presentations and video available. So we just have to do some consultations with the panelists to make sure that they're okay with us sharing copies of their presentation. But if they are, then we will be distributing that information to all of you. Okay, so to wrap up, let me just thank again Mona, Riki, for your time, for your amazing perspectives and insights. I hope you both will also join us for the remainder of the roundtable over the week. We know you'll make some great contributions to our other sessions, which continue tomorrow, Wednesday, where we're going to, sorry, just pulling up my agenda for tomorrow, where we begin at 10 o'clock Eastern time here, Washington, D.C. time. And tomorrow's format, we're going to change just a little bit. It's going to be more interactive, more breakout sessions, if you will. We'll have 3 separate series, one focusing on social inclusion and diversity, one focusing on leadership, and a third focusing on women in the maritime domain. And they will both, all 3 of them will be facilitated by extremely capable colleagues of mine at the Secretariat and also working in the field. I hope you all will come back. I know it's a huge ask of us for you to give 3 hours each day of your time to this effort. I understand we are all juggling many hats and extremely stretched for time, and also probably a little bit fatigued by so many virtual meetings. But I do ask for your kind consideration in making the effort and joining us for the remainder of the series tomorrow and on Friday, because as I said at the beginning, and I'll say again, we absolutely have to work together. This is an area that we are committed to 100%, and we need all of you to help us really dig deep, right? Not just identifying the challenges, but more importantly, helping to identify the solutions and the role that my department, the OAS, can help play in making important improvements to strengthening the gender balance in the maritime and port environment. So thank you all for your attention here today. Thank you again to our first 5 panel speakers today. Really impressive, really inspiring. We're really grateful for your time. And to the rest of you, thank you all so much for joining us here this afternoon. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow.